Solve the equation. We have x to the third power minus 2x squared plus 9x minus 18 equals 0. This is 4 terms, so I'm going to solve by factor by grouping, or at least try that, and see what happens. So the first 2 terms have an x squared in common, and if I factor that out, that's going to leave an x minus 2. Because x squared times x makes x to the third, x squared times negative 2 makes negative 2x squared. Second 2 terms have a 9 in common, so I'm going to put plus 9 and then times, and it's going to be x and then minus 2. Because 9 times x makes 9x, and 9 times negative 2 makes negative 18, and that equals 0. So factor by grouping will work because these x minus 2's, they're both the same. If they weren't the same, we couldn't factor by grouping. So let me do the grouping step. So now I'll do the grouping step. It's going to be x squared plus 9 times x minus 2 equals 0. Okay, now the equation's factored. We can apply the zero product property and finish solving for x. So this first factor, x squared plus 9 equals 0, and the second factor, x minus 2 equals 0. This first factor I can solve by square roots. I'll subtract 9 from both sides, and that will give x squared equals negative 9. Take the square root of both sides, going to be x equals plus or minus the square root of negative 9. Simplifying, x equals plus or minus, and 9 is a perfect square, but we have that negative in there, which is going to make it imaginary. So we're going to have a 3i. How does that work? If you're not sure, I'll write it over here. Negative 9 equals negative 1 times 9. And that's negative 1 times 3 squared. So when you're taking the square root of this whole thing, you have the square root of negative 1 times 3 squared. So I can take out a 3 because we have that 3 squared, and it becomes 3 square roots of negative 1, and that's simply 3i. Okay, now the x equals negative 2. Now the x minus 2 equals 0. Add 2 to both sides. X equals 2. And I encourage you to do this step and actually write it out. If you try mental math here, there's probably a 50-50 chance you'll mess up the sign and put negative 2 for x instead of 2. So just take the extra few seconds to write the step, make sure you get it correctly. So x equals 2 and plus or minus 3i are our solutions. You could also do a final check on the calculator by graphing the related function. Okay, so here's the related function. And the graph of that, you can see it looks like there's an x-intercept at x equals 2, and that's the only x-intercept, which is good because we had one real and 2 imaginary solutions.